Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4, playing some World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be looking at another premium ship. This time it will be the Tier 5 Royal Navy destroyer, HMS Gallant. Like all my reviews, I'll start with the ship's history, move into analysis, talk about the commanders, then run down the stats and finish off with a bit of gameplay. Like always, there should be a list of time codes in the description if you do want to skip around. In reality, HMS Gallant was a G-class destroyer, which you could probably guess if you followed British naming conventions. In total, she was the fifth of 9 G-class destroyers, though along with the H-class destroyers and Havant class, originally built for Brazil, but requisitioned when the war started, there would be a total of 24 ships of roughly this same design. Laid down in September 1934, launched in September 1935, she was commissioned into service in February of 1936. She would see her first service around the time of the Spanish Civil War, something of a proxy war between the Axis and Allies, on top of being a very real civil war inside Spain. The Gallant was attacked by Spanish nationalist aircraft on one occasion, but received no damage. Early in World War II, the Gallant was stationed in Alexandria, Egypt, part of the Mediterranean fleet led by none other than HMS Warspite. But by October 1939, she started escorting convoys. Of course, Germany invaded France in May of 1940, so by June the French were pretty much finished. This put the entire British expeditionary force in jeopardy, a force of more than 200,000 men. They'd been pushed back to Dunkirk. Since the Gallant was an object capable of floating, she was sent by the Royal Navy as part of Operation Dynamo, an attempt to rescue the British expeditionary forces as well as Allied soldiers, which basically doubled the numbers of people waiting for transport at Dunkirk. Originally intended to rendezvous with the Polish destroyer Błyskawica, Gallant never quite met up with her. Nevertheless, she did take part in the Miracle of Dunkirk, where around 338,000 Allied troops were evacuated from northern France, the Gallant carrying around 1,500 herself. An especially impressive number if you consider a G-class destroyer only has a crew of 150 or less. After a brief bit of service in the British Home Fleet, which included an unsuccessful attempt to hunt down Scharnhorst, the Gallant returned to the Mediterranean. She would end up taking part in Operation Hurry, a curiously named effort to hold on to Malta. With Italy's entry into the war on the Axis side, there were many in England who considered Malta, a small Commonwealth nation 90 miles south of Sicily, to be indefensible. Still, Churchill would have none of that, and Britain would hold on to the tiny island nation for the entire war. While in this theater, Gallant would take part in the sinking of the Italian submarine La Folle, alongside her sister ship, HMS Griffin and Hotspur. Gallant's service would be cut short, though, during Operation Excess, another operation to continue the defense of Malta. She struck a mine. The explosion blew off the bow section of the ship, killing 65 of her crew. What remained of the ship was towed to Malta, where she actually was expected to be repaired, until she received further damage from several near misses in an air raid. Considering the ship to be beyond the point reasonable to repair, she was towed to St. Paul's Bay and sunk as a block ship on the 5th of April 1942. The Gallant stayed there until 1953, when she was finally broken up. Folks are probably not going to find it strange that I like when ships with an interesting history are included in Legends, and for better or worse, if you want the Gallant, that probably is most of her appeal, along with this attractive camouflage actually. Unless you specifically are the type of person who played the Icarus and thought you would like the ship if it played a little bit more like an American destroyer, I'm not sure that this ship offers too much to the destroyer landscape. Just to clarify, the biggest difference between the Gallant and the Icarus is its consumables. The Icarus comes with a handful of short-duration smokescreens with very low recharge times, and sonar, where the Gallant has just 2 charges of a normal duration smoke, and it trades off its sonar for a speed boost. This isn't a completely unworkable trade, but it's also not that great either. With relatively low damage per minute, in every way that you can do damage to another ship, it just doesn't seem to work. While you might gain some advantage in cap control with your slight speed advantage and engine boost, you do lose out on combat utility wherever you are when you get there. While you do retain the sequential fire torpedoes, Typical of Royal Navy destroyers, the angles that you can fire these torpedoes are a little bit less convenient. So while the Gallant may not be the weakest destroyer at Tier 5, it probably is the weakest destroyer at Tier 5 that you can buy with real money. For commanders, you do have a bit of a toss-up. The most gun-capable destroyer captain will probably use Philip Vine. He's going to offer you more in terms of survivability because you can just take straight-up damage reduction in your first slot, along with keeping your engine and rudder going in a pinch, and also force a few more misses with sidestep. That will give you the opportunity to increase your fire chance with your legendary perk. Probably not worth it if you're only legendary rank 1. Fire can definitely help your potential damage if you're planning on fighting battleships, but keep in mind that if you choose this trait, you are making any engagement that you have with the destroyer that much more difficult. Probably the best way to play the Gallant is as a torpedo boat, and if you want to do that, Tyrwhitt is going to be the best commander for doing so. He'll be able to increase the speed of your torpedoes alongside range, while also lowering your reload. If you want to make your detectability that much better than it already is, he does have access to Fragile Threat. That will definitely help you win out in the spotting game a little more often, on the one hand, but it will make your already tiny pool of hit points even smaller, on the other. There's really two ways to look at this. You don't really lose that much health if you don't start with that much to begin with, or that the first time that you're spotted is very likely to be the last. And the truth is, both are probably true. If you want to try for a middle ground, Jellicoe isn't going to do anything truly awful to your ship, and you can rejoice in the knowledge that you can use Fully Packed to get a third smokescreen or engine boost. Unfortunately, while that might be the best reason to use Jellicoe, it does also leave your engine and rudder vulnerable to incapacitation. While you do come with some run-of-the-mill torpedo skills, Burn It Down is probably the second best skill he offers, particularly if you're the type of person who might normally want to use Vine, but only have him at Legendary 1. Next, we'll jump into stats. For direct comparison, I'll probably talk about this versus the Icarus for the most part, but we'll also be looking at the base stats versus all the other Tier 5 destroyers. Previously, the Icarus had the smallest HP pool of any Tier 5 destroyer at just 12,100. But the Gallant manages to slip in with 100 less than that. That's about 2,200 hit points less than the average destroyer at the tier. And that has a lot to do with the poor survivability that the Gallant has when she's spotted. The 6 to 16 millimeters of armor is fairly typical at the tier, which is to say that every HE round is going to do a ton of damage to you, but most AP rounds will just go right through. When we look at artillery, you have 4 120mm guns, ranging out to 10.2 kilometers. They reload every 5 seconds and turn 180 degrees in just 18 seconds. Your HE damage is 1700, but more importantly, the fire chance is 8%. The Icarus is pretty much the same here, except that the Icarus does enjoy an extra 100 meters of range on its main battery. This is pretty minor, so much so that it's almost not worth mentioning. That said, your damage per minute is about 25% lower than the average destroyer at this tier, which does combine pretty unfavorably with your low hit points if you do need to get into one of those knife fights. In terms of torpedoes, you actually have what I consider to be one of the most interesting trades in the game, mostly because it's a total wash. With the Gallant, you have 2 quadruple launchers that have a reload of 96 seconds. They range out to 8.0 kilometers and do 15,433 damage, with a 1.3 kilometer detectability and 61 knot speed. These are exactly the same types of torpedoes that you would have on the Icarus. And the thing is, the Icarus has 2 quintuple launchers, and the reload speed is exactly slow enough to make this a completely even trade in terms of overall potential damage. That's really pretty good news for the Gallant. But the thing about the Gallant is that its torpedo angles are noticeably worse. Maybe not by a lot, but as you can see here, the forward angles that you have on the Gallant are, unfortunately, just a little bit worse. The nice thing about Royal Navy destroyers, though, is that you have the option to single launch torpedoes. Whether you're trying to poke somebody for flooding damage, to force the damage control, or make a last stand, there's definitely a situation where this is a huge advantage over other nations' destroyers. That said, making a charge into the middle of several enemies to single torpedo them one after another is probably going to get cut short by your low hit points and non-existent armor, so you'll have to be exceptionally smart if you want to do this. But as we ease into maneuverability, the Gallant does have at least one advantage. Both the Icarus and Gallant have exceptional turning circles and rudder shifts, even for a destroyer at this tier. And in this case, both of these stats are exactly the same. The Gallant does inch out the Icarus by 1/2 a knot, which puts her on the low side of average overall. This, combined with the speed boost, makes repositioning and running away a little more plausible than it would be with the Icarus. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to equipment. And then standing in the way is concealment. There's really no difference here between the Gallant and Icarus. In terms of how it looks in the big picture, they are both ever so slightly below average, enjoying just 100 meters of concealment over the average destroyer at tier 5. Due to the small guns that the Icarus and Gallant have, they both have the same concealment while firing within smoke, which is a meager 2.3 kilometers. As I mentioned before, your consumable choices are decidedly non-British in the Gallant. You have only 2 uses of smoke, and they're your standard smoke rather than the short duration, quick recharging smoke that you would have on the British tech tree ships. This is kind of a question of taste, but for me, it's something of a net negative. Your other consumable is speed boost, which is your average speed boost. It's not really anything to complain about other than that you traded away sonar for this. And considering your low DPM, lackluster guns, that's one of the reasons why the Icarus might work for you, while the Gallant does not. Alright, gonna jump into a battle now. We're gonna be on straight, and of course, taking a look at the Gallant, I will go ahead and put my commander up on the screen. As you can see, I'm working with Philip Vine, and that means this is when I was testing this out to see how does this work in terms of a gunboat. As an early disclaimer, I don't really love this match, but I'm going to show it off because it mostly shows what the Gallant is good and bad at. And I do actually plan on releasing another video tomorrow to show the Gallant in kind of its ideal state, or at least functioning at a high level, whereas this is really just more of what can you expect in an average, pretty decent game. In any case, what we're doing at this point is heading up towards sea, obviously. If we're playing domination, what we want to do is make sure to cap as many bases as possible, and particularly as a destroyer, that means that's pretty much your job. Now, I don't particularly want to get into a gunfight with too many people. You can see I was looking at who was in the match because I need to know what to be careful of. Obviously, anything that's a cruiser is bad news for me. But most of the destroyers that you will meet at this tier are actually a pretty considerable threat to you. At this point, I do go ahead and take a pot shot, thinking that they won't be able to return fire on me. Obviously, they have another ship that's quite a bit closer, so they don't really need to worry so much about shooting a tiny little destroyer that's guns don't actually do that much damage. Because as you can see, I've hit several times at this point. And we are actually still sitting at 0 damage. The 120mm guns on this, not incredibly great, not incredible. So oftentimes if you don't hit high enough on a battleship, you're not going to walk away with anything. There, of course, we managed to get another pen and another shatter, which means that we're up to 8 hits with no damage. This is a trend that can't possibly continue forever. So we are starting to push up there. Obviously, we know there's a destroyer up there, and in some part, my mind is thinking that that's still my job, even though I'm really not all that capable of dealing with it. But this is, more importantly, not a really good play, because you will see there's this battleship in the backfield, and if he took interest in me, he could do a lot of damage to me pretty quickly. Now I am putting a lot of shots out there on that Guepard. It should beat me in any gun duel. Unfortunately, it looks like he's decided to shoot AP, so he's not doing a whole lot of damage to me because all of his shells are just flying straight through. Now I am kind of switching my aim here. I really do want to hit his torpedoes because I don't want to be torpedoed in a destroyer. That is always somewhat embarrassing. But with these 4 120mm guns, you can see it takes quite a while to get rid of him. Obviously, as a French destroyer, he probably has a little bit more hit points than average, but we also have pretty poor DPM, and that was definitely not helping. The one nice thing about that whole exchange is that this Koenig does not pay any attention to us the entire time, and you can see he's turning out. And now that I'm hidden behind this island, I am going to take a couple of pot shots at him, because if we can start a fire, that's free damage. But it does not look like that is in the cards. Oh, there we go. So we managed to get an assisted capture. We're looking at one base to one base, essentially, and we are losing the base that we originally started with. There's no one back there really to challenge it, so that's gonna be a loss for us. I have my choices between going back there fighting another destroyer. My guess is he went up the middle without too much damage, so I'll probably just be throwing my life away. Or I can try to help out up here to take out this Koenig and make sure that we get into D in a reasonable amount of time. You can tell which of these two options I'm taking. Now I am waiting a pretty good amount of time here because essentially I want him to shoot before I get into the gunfight. That'll give me at least 20 seconds of unanswered gunfire before he has to think about whether or not he wants to shoot at me. Chances are he probably still won't because he'll be 2, 3, 4 seconds into his actual reload by the time he has an opportunity to target me. So should we reload into HE to fight a destroyer? Maybe, maybe not. Just playing the odds, really. At this point, I'm okay with losing my spot because I think he has reloaded or is about to reload. And he can go ahead and maybe shoot somebody else who has a much better chance of surviving. You can see behind us, our battleship is well angled, so he'll probably take that hit pretty well. Now I'm going to go ahead, fire again. This is, of course, using an additional fire chance, so we're up to 10% fire chance on this particular build. We are setting some fires, but as you can see, like American destroyers, it is a little bit of a struggle. There's the shot that I was a little bit afraid of. We do take it, and obviously at that range, he only hits me a couple of times, and the shells are going to go right through, just because I don't have any armor. This Koenig continues to run away, and I am, as you can tell, alternating between harassing him and actually just shadowing him. I don't really need to shadow him, but I do want to get into that base. And the only way to do it at this point seems to be to drive him off. At this point, one additional fire should pretty well do him in. So you can tell exactly what I'm trying to do with all those shots. Again, we do struggle a little bit with actually starting up the fires. We're going to cut back in towards D so that we can jump into that base and stop the point bleed at the very least. probably also make sure he stays spotted. I think we might be the only ones who have eyes on him. Now you can see he's more or less continuing in this big S-like route, and it does look like he's slowly drifting towards the edge of the circle. I'm checking where he's at, and I'm also paying attention to that island, because that island is going to give me basically a free shot if I take it right about here. And then you can see I immediately drop spot and managed to steal a fire at the very end. That means he's gone. No way he's going to be able to live through that. Things are starting to turn around for us. If we can capture this base, then it's just going to come down to points and kills. And both of those look like they're kind of either in our favor or moving in our favor, with both A and D being captured. And we're also up 2 ships. The only remaining ship on the enemy team is this California. Fun, interesting. I actually was going to review the California this week, but the Gallant came out and I did not have enough time to do 2 reviews. So that will hopefully be out next week. In any case, the California is a nice slow target. It's also a very fat target. So we have a lot of opportunity to maybe land some hits, because even if she starts to maneuver, it's going to be hard to actually change the direction of that ship within the detectability time of this particular boat. Now, one thing I do want you to take a little mental note there, just like earlier where I wasn't able to get my torpedoes all the way around on the Gepard or against the Koenig, just what the torpedo angles on this look like. Not super great for a destroyer, really. And I feel like it's between 5 and 10 degrees less forward than you get on the Icarus. Now, I am single launching torpedoes. That's obviously the great strength of the Gallant. If you do manage to land single torpedoes, you can do nice things like that. Thanks to the excellent torpedo reduction that the California enjoys, I do just a fraction of the damage I was supposed to, so we come in with just a little bit over 8,000 damage. Activating my long duration smoke, I'm just going to sit here, and I've got a lot of room before he can see me inside this smoke screen. And at this point, I actually start wondering, wait a minute, does he have target acquisition at this level? I'm not really sure. In any case, I don't have a target for a few seconds. We're kind of just paying attention to what's going on in the actual game. The thing about paying attention to the actual game is I was not paying attention to how much time was left. You'd think that'd be part of the normal game. We sail on to victory. Here you can see we did just 55,000 damage, but due to playing the objectives like a responsible teammate, we do manage to walk away with 2,300 base XP and sit at the top of the charts. Now, overall, Gallant, for me, pretty unimpressive ship. I think that she's kind of an artifact of a time on PC when there wasn't a Royal Navy destroyer line. And I think this ship would be a lot more attractive if you did have some options in terms of your consumables, both the being able to trade back and forth for normal smoke versus Royal Navy smoke, and also the ability to switch back and forth between maybe speed boost and sonar, or maybe all 4. That could be a lot of fun. In any case, she's a bit underwhelming, particularly when you have other ships out there like the T-61, but even the Aigle and Monaghan did feel a little bit more unique, and I felt a little bit more useful in them. In any case, that's my review on the Gallant. I hope you join me for the replay I will post tomorrow. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you on the next one.